Thank you for everyone for joining. Tonight is the first night we're kicking off Cyber Mondays with CyberVisionaries. My name is Tonia Webster, and I am the founder of CyberVisionaries Institute, and we are the ones that are hosting this special monthly session. And I just want to give a little bit of information of how we got here. So I created a post a couple weeks ago about the gap in the cybersecurity industry and the role that the industry plays in how people are getting into the industry, and are we actually deeming people as qualified based off of certifications or degrees that are needed. And it sparked an awesome debate. And I think that, it gave an opportunity to get different perspectives. So I am honored enough to have 3 people on here with different perspectives to bring to this conversation. And a little bit about myself before I get into them. I've been in the industry for over 25 years doing cybersecurity, doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And it's allowed me the opportunity to be in spaces and learn different technologies. And so that's how I got here. So I'm going to kick it over to Matt and allow him to introduce himself.
Sure. Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here. So my name is Matt Webster, and my whole shtick is bridging business and cybersecurity together. I think that's absolutely critical. I think that it's one of the things that's missing whenever I work with clients and others. That is the angle that I take, everything from a risk standpoint to other standpoints. I've been in the industry for roughly 30 years. And so I've got a lot of experience from a lot of different perspectives related to cybersecurity, and happy to be here and contribute to the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. And now I'm going to kick it over to Awais and allow him to introduce himself as well.
Hello, this is Awais. I've been graduated as a master's in computer science back from Pakistan, and then I moved to USA, and I have about 5 years of experience in software development. So from USA, I completed another master's in cybersecurity. So since after my graduation, I've been waiting for something to land in the job in cybersecurity industry. Thank you.
You're on mute, Tonia.
Thank you for being here, Wes. And then lastly, Jeremy.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Dupuis. I'm the Information Security Officer at Columbus Regional Hospital. I've been in the industry for 18 years now. I've spent a little bit of it in the government sector working for the National Security Agency. Like Matt, my goal is to bring cybersecurity as a business enabler. So I look at mitigating risk and making businesses profitable and securing their infrastructure as best as possible to do that.
Thank you, Jeremy. To those that are joining, please feel free to drop any comments and questions in the chat as we go along. This is an open forum to, provide your input or any questions from the panel, myself, and just have a free-flowing conversation. So we're going to get started. So the first thing I want to ask, which is basically what kicked everything off, is, and this is to everyone on the panel, do you believe that the cybersecurity industry is genuinely facing a talent shortage, or is the industry unintentionally creating barriers or boundaries that limit the pipeline for people to get in? And whoever wants to open, I'm opening up the floor.
So I don't think that the industry is intentionally creating barriers. I think it's happening almost organically. So with cybersecurity, I think it's undeniable that the job of cybersecurity professionals isn't necessarily to stop hackers, but to limit and minimize risk for organizations. So whenever you take any type of approach, whether it's hiring, whether it's protecting organizations, or whether it's investing, businesses are looking at risk. And part of that in the hiring side of things is trying to identify the least risky candidate to get the highest return on investment off of.
So I can jump in here a little bit more. I do think that there are some areas, and like with Jeremy, I do think there is some sort of organic movement, but it's not on here's the one way to look at it and only look this way, because this is a religious debate that I stay out of. You know, some are saying, nope, we have way too many candidates. Some are saying we don't have enough. And those arguments are vociferous on both sides. And I see the logic. Where I come in is saying, let's try to understand some of what's going on from an industry perspective related to the people and related to those challenges. A lot of companies do have challenges hiring people. But having been in the CISO role myself multiple times, I can tell you we don't always pull the strings the way we would like to. People want to create these absurd requirements that are coming in and, you know, you have to do this and it's got to be this. And it makes zero sense in many of those cases. And it ends up being a big challenge, I think, from a hiring perspective. Now, you can find that, but then you're looking for a unicorn. So you end up wasting months of time trying to find that unicorn because different managers want their input and fingerprints all over everything. You know, not everybody is this way. I mean, I've had places that have been completely open and we can define those things, but in other places, you know, they're creating these unrealistic expectations for the job seekers, and that simply isn't appropriate. I think there's a lot of misunderstandings about the cybersecurity role and what it actually takes to succeed, and that creates a lot of challenges, not only for businesses, but for new people jumping in.
I see that as an issue also. So with the certification industry, for instance, if you go to any job site and you search a cybersecurity position, you're going to see CISSP pop up for almost entry-level cybersecurity positions. And I say entry-level is kind of a play on words because it's very difficult to go from zero to cybersecurity. You have to have some type of technical background. But you also going from zero to CISSP to cybersecurity is also not the path. You just don't jump into a director, a CISO role overnight. So with business leaders not understanding what these credentials mean, what the difference between a Sec Plus and a CYSA is, understanding the difference between CYSA and CISSP, I think that's a big barrier that's often misunderstood. And I think part of it is saturation in the industry. We get roughly 50,000 graduates from college programs for cybersecurity a year. So in addition to that, they're off going and getting these certifications. So CYSA, Sec Plus, any of the GSEC certifications. And it's causing this talent pool to just build up over time. And that makes it really hard. And that makes a kind of an artificial barrier for people that are trying to get in through non-traditional means. So if you don't have those certifications, but there's 50,000 plus that are getting that every year, how do you compete with those on paper?
Well, there's another angle.
Oh, and I was going to say also that, but that's where the industry is creating the issue, is that they're telling people the only way you can get into the industry right now is having the degrees and having these certifications. So now you have an influx of people that are trying to find jobs and trying to get into this industry. And the only means and way of that they can do that is through certifications. So how do we change that? How do we change that mindset?
Matt, you were about to jump in.
Yeah, I was going to jump in with a slightly different angle, and I do agree with your point that that's something we need to change. I mean, I've always fought to change that particular mindset with others, trying to create something that's reasonable from an industry perspective and getting people based on skills and talking to them and having a conversation and not just the certification. But what's interesting too, when you get into that CISO role, I see a lot of CISOs. I'm very connected into the CISO community. I see a lot of CISOs that are striving to get into the job, but they have experience, so they don't want them. And so they hire these people that are really underqualified for the role, and they don't even know what they're getting into with that. They have no idea what the job entails. And there's a whole nother set of dynamics that are going on up at that C level. And a lot of it, they don't understand what the situation is, and they're caught off guard when they're going for those positions. So you're seeing a lot of different dynamics going on within the work world. But to your earlier point, that's what I do, is really focus on trying to get the right people and the right conversations. And that's how we can start to change things. Stop having other people who don't know enough about cybersecurity making these judgment calls.
So that actually leads into my second question. And before I get to that, I want to, there's a couple comments that came in. And I'm going to come back to the AI question, because I think we can get into that a little bit later on. So whoever posted the AI question, please know I'm going to come back to that. But someone said that they agree with you, Matt, that they believe the tech industry in general is looking for unicorns, and the position goes unfilled and reposted week after week. And I can tell you from my perspective, where I've been doing PKI for over 25 years, the reason why that field is so niche is because it is hard to fill. And it's hard to fill because you don't have people trained in it. So it's a domino effect. Where does the training come from? How do you get people trained? And it goes back to what you said, Matt, is they don't know what they don't know. They just know that, hey, we want to get this role filled, but we don't know how to get it filled. And when you don't have the qualified people, and you're not training them to take these roles week after week after week, they're just going to go unfilled, right?
Just to jump in real quick, a couple of points that we've mentioned here. The PKI, I think that's an excellent point, because when we're talking about unicorns, is it really unicorns that businesses are seeking? A lot of these certifications, so we just saw Oracle lay off 35,000 people. We're projected to have 350,000 IT layoffs this year. So these are people that are coming in. They're not just college students or entry-level cybersecurity positions. These are the quote unquote unicorns. They've got the GSEC certifications. They've got, CISSPs. They've got all these certifications in this stack. They've also got experience with big name companies, CrowdStrike, Arctic Wolf, you name it. F5 is one that laid off recently. So if businesses are able to put out a job posting and they're able to get a whole bunch of candidates that have that experience, are they really unicorns, or are they trying to sift through qualified candidates? And that's what I see a lot when I go to hire, is I'm sifting through a ton of qualified candidates. So it's hard for somebody that's less qualified or has less credentials to stand out. Now, to the PKI point that you made, I think that's a great point, because while it's a niche field, where's the demand for it? Because a lot of organizations, when they're hiring cybersecurity talent, and I did over the weekend, I was looking up PKI positions, and there's not nearly as many of them as there are general cybersecurity positions, such as a cybersecurity engineer, people that are going to work on like a watch floor, for instance. In those positions, companies are looking for an instant ROI. So they want somebody with the experience to be able to jump in and start doing the job. And they've got a plethora of candidates that can do that. So they have to sift through those.
So let me make a quick comment on that, because I've been doing this for a really long time. What happens, and this actually leads into my next question, is the lack of talent. Is that creating security incidences, or the lack of knowledge of knowing what you need? And I will tell you, a lot of companies don't know that they need PKI until they need it. And then they realize how important it is. And they realize that skill is something that they've been lacking. And then now that's why you see so many PKI positions posted that go unfilled, because companies didn't realize how important that is. Especially, you're talking about zero architecture and certificates that are now coming down to 47-day lifespans. So now companies are realizing, oh my gosh, we need PKI talent. We treated this as a secondary skill. And when we talk about unicorns, that is a unicorn field. But why does it make it unicorn? Because you haven't trained anybody to do it. That's why it's a unicorn. That's why it's niche. So I think the industry, and this goes to my question, is, do you think that the industry is so quick to fill roles that they're missing the fact that it's security incidences, or potential security incidences, by not filling the correct roles? And I'm going to put that on the table.
Yeah, I think so. And I'd like to get Matt's take on this as well, because while businesses need PKI, trying to tell that to an executive team that's trying to cut budget and they tell the IT department they need to cut 35% in the next 48 months is a whole different argument to have. So is it creating a gap inside cybersecurity programs? Absolutely. Matt, what are you seeing from kind of your experience on that?
So I see a lot of different things. I'm going to back up a little bit before I jump forward, if you give me a minute or so here, because I think we've got a lack of mentoring that's going on. CISOs are underneath a tremendous amount of pressure and get stuff done, get stuff done, get stuff done, and the stuff is being piled on them. I know so many CISOs that have been working, like I've done the 80, 90, 100-hour work weeks, for months on end. We get burned out. Do you think I want to hire somebody who's wet behind the ears for a brand new position? No, I don't want to get a level 1. I want a level 3. I can't afford to go get somebody in. I think there's a lot of cases where that is very much the truth. Now, when I've been in more comfortable situations, I brought in those level 1 people. But a lot of companies aren't looking at, hey, how do we mentor and coach and bring them on? Now, I do know some companies that are doing that, and I give them a lot of credit where credit is due. But that becomes a whole nother challenge when you're starting to build your company and build what you're doing. But that strain really puts a switch in the job market. Now, some of the companies that it mentioned, what they'll do is they'll say, let's get somebody new in. Great. Let them try 2 or 3 different jobs and have a couple months in each job to see what looks good to them. Then they can go ahead and choose what do they want to do. But it depends on the size of the company. If you've got, a level 2, level 3, and a level 4 person in that pipeline, they can take the time to go train somebody new. And so that's what I'm seeing. It all depends on the industry. It all depends on the company, where that and how seriously are they taking cybersecurity. But Tonia, you brought up something really interesting and something that I have seen personally myself, where there's a communication block. And Jeremy, you were talking about this too, because CISOs need to learn how to communicate with executives. If we go in talking PKI, like, what are you doing? The average CEO is going to get frustrated with that language. We need a way to communicate in a way that makes sense. Like I teach, the next generation CISO course, and a lot of that is about communication. How do you communicate in a way that makes sense so other people understand what that means? So I think there's a lot of things going on. There's a lack of patience from a business standpoint. You get a lot of CISOs that are stuck in the rut of trying to get things done, and it creates this kind of weird dynamic that we need to work on and become better at in terms of stewards of organizations. And I think that we need to open up that communication, and that comes in CISOs learning more of the business language and the business learning a little bit of cybersecurity as well. But everybody has to listen to one another. If you take just the risk communication practices, we've got several different languages. You talk to the CFO, they're going to talk value at risk and conditional value at risk. That is not in the typical CISO's language. And so a lot of this is learning how do we communicate. And as silly as that sounds, that's important. That's part of what I do with companies, is teach them how to communicate. So I think there's a lot of pictures going on here.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. And then I want to get to Awais, but I want to just make this comment. The cohort that I'm teaching, I literally, the lessons that I'm teaching this week is how to communicate technical issues to different audiences. You have executive levels, you have managers, and then you have your technical team. Every single one of those requires a different type of communication. You can't go in and explain technical terms to someone that's only worried about bottom line dollar, or how do I cut cost, or where does this fit into the company structure. So being a technical person, being cybersecurity in cybersecurity, it's not just about your technical skills, it's about your communication skills. And if you lack on that, then it keeps you behind. I want to make sure that we are bringing Awais into this conversation. So Awais, this question is specifically for you, okay? Because you're going to have the best perspective on this. And I'm sure that there's people on the comments that can relate to this. So please post your comments for this next question. So the question is, for those who are actively trying to enter the cybersecurity field, what has been your biggest barrier so far?
So you want me to start? Yeah, okay.
Absolutely. This is your time to shine, Awais.
Yeah, then that's my time. So the thing is, since I completed my master's in cybersecurity afterwards, so that was a completely new system for me. When I moved to USA, I did not know how to land into, internships or entry level roles. Neither I get any help from my university professors. Okay, you can put that on me that most of the time the classes were virtually. But the thing is, after completion of, we had a hope that after completion of the masters, we can figure out something in the market, maybe some internships or some entry level role. But so far, so when I tried to apply on internships, most of the time I found that the internships are required only the students who have been currently enrolled in some programs. So that was one problem. On other words, the other opportunities where I saw that they are not looking for much experience, but they have, they had a flood of requirements that were required, like freshly graduate, he needs more, almost everything about the tools or most of the tools like I never heard. He should know about the clouds. He should know about the cybersecurity, tools. He should know about the programming tools as well. And you can cover a bunch of tools, but on top of that, they are also looking for some cybersecurity certifications. There are a bunch of certifications they have been required, like Security
That's
Plus.
on top of your degree that
Yeah.
they. So let me ask you this: going through your degree program, do you feel like the tools that they're asking for now in job descriptions that you see, do you feel like that you got exposure to those tools in your degree program?
So, if you are talking about the tools, so no one can learn the tools entirely. I had some exposure. I was working on my own and still I've been working. And I'm not the kind of guy that who just been sitting and he's just waiting for the right opportunity to come. I'm still working on some different tools, some certifications continuously on daily basis, but still I've been struggling with to figure out some job, you know. And then there is not just one certification. There are a bunch of certifications if you see on the entry level role. So like they need Security Plus, they need sometimes CISSP. That particular certification requires at least 3 to 4 years of experience to get that certification, and then they need some Network Plus as well. So on top of that, you can see the requirements right now in the market. Even for the entry level roles, they are looking for 3 to 4 years of experience. So just like other candidates, so far you can see the post on LinkedIn. These everyone, almost every student or everyone who wants to switch into cybersecurity, people have been frustrated even after having the training from the boot camp. Even I had trainings from a bunch of boot camps, and still I've been struggling. And on top of that, the ATS stuff as well. So most of the applications have been rejected by the AI before anyone can see, and then later, sorry about that. So late, and later you can see if somehow it reaches to the HR, and then they have their own criteria. And I still remember that I applied in in a company name as agency in New York. So they were offering some apprenticeship. So I applied on that multiple times, not just once. So changed my resume and I tried to score. I tried to achieve the up to 90% score of the ATS, but
So you
still,
were trying to beat the ATS score basically through your.
yeah.
So let me pause here for a minute because I think this is important, and I want Matt and Jeremy to kind of chime in on this because they do a lot of hiring. Do you feel that the way the industry has set up how people like can get into the industry just off of resumes? Let's just talk about resumes right now. You have so many people trying to beat the system, beat the ATS system. How does that play into this qualified? What's qualified?
Matt, you want to jump in on this one?
Sure. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that are going on right now. I do think that AI is playing into what's going on because and this is where I have some frustration because they take level one jobs. And right now, what you're hearing, and I work with this from a lot of different standpoints, I see this coming in through the PE and the VC firms. They're like, you're an AI to me or you're dead to me. A new company, this is what it looks like: founder, co-founder, and a bunch of agents. And there's companies developing, here's your new CTO, just tell it what you want and it does it for you. And you see the same thing for all types of roles that are out there, and they're doing all the designing. But the reality is, when you're looking at this stuff, I've got some concerns around that because what I see all the time, even though I tell my AI, please correct me, it will still go through and recommend things to me that are 90% wrong. Mm-hmm. And say, don't tell me stuff like that. Tell me the truth. Don't sit down and sugarcoat it. Don't make me feel good. I don't want to be delusional. I want some real information coming through. And still, it creates these types of things. So when you're talking about something like AI, I think it is disrupting things, but I also think due to the economic uncertainties that we're dealing with here in the United States and globally, I think that businesses are partially using that as an excuse. And I think that, like, I gave a keynote a couple weeks back, and the one thing everybody saw, the IT team knew this wasn't as good as the AI was not as good as a lot of the tools. But the business still like AI first, and they're jumping forward with a lot of this stuff. So I think there's going to be some sort of reconciliation that has to go on between the potentials of AI, which are fantastic, and the realities. And I think we've got to come down to that. But my concern is people like Awais, we need them to be looking at this stuff and saying, that doesn't quite make sense to me. And a lot of people don't. They just cognitively give up. Yeah, I'll just accept whatever AI says. And that is the wrong approach. I never trust AI. I will use it, but I go validate it. And is it true? Sometimes it is right. I'm like, cool, this is exactly what I want. Other times, not so much. But that's what I mean. We can't just sit down and give up and just assume, well, AI is a new overlord, just accept it.
Let it do its thing and not worry.
Yeah.
So somebody just posted something, and I want to get to you, Jeremy, your question, but I'm interested in what you guys think about this. It says recruiters are actively searching for the ideal candidate on LinkedIn for these roles, and they rarely check the ATS for technical roles. Do you think that that's a valid statement?
I think it depends. Matt was saying earlier that different companies of different sizes have different capabilities, and recruiters is one of them. So a company the size of CrowdStrike, for instance, they've got a lot more recruiters that can go out and spend a lot more time doing that kind of thing. Even if they are doing that, where the recruiters are on LinkedIn and other job boards looking for talent, there's going to be a kind of a level of triage to it. So if the role goes unfilled for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, eventually they're going to start looking at those ATS systems, and they're going to be looking for qualified candidates, contacts to reach out to based off of that. The problem is a lot of people are seeing, and I'm seeing this myself, where there's so many applicants and they're applying using AI generated resumes to these positions, that all the ATS is being tricked basically, and they don't have the skills. So when you get down to vetting them, because hopefully you're not going to hire them just off of paper, when you get down to the interviews and actually vetting them and validating that they have the skills, they can't speak to any of them. The last position I hired for, I had the perfect candidate. I mean, you guys want to talk about unicorns. On paper, every single checkbox that I could have for a cybersecurity professional was checked. When I interviewed her, she wasn't able to talk about any type of firewall work that she did, which that would have been kind of a hot button issue for me, being able to write firewall tables and things like that in Palo Alto. So she wasn't able to do that. When we started talking GRC, she couldn't talk about risk mitigation or any type of GRC. She was able to hit on some HIPAA points, but when we got into like any type of SIEM or EDR technology, she couldn't speak to any of that. But she had all this experience and had all these keywords in her search. And from what I've heard, we're seeing more and more of that happening. It's so bad that even third-party risk management, I've heard that even SOC 2s are being AI generated, and they're completely false. I haven't seen it myself yet, but it's something that we're on the lookout for, and I'm kind of nervous about.
And I can speak to that and say I've spoken to several people who are basically emphasizing what you just said, Jeremy, is that they're getting these resumes with the perfect candidates, but when they get in front of interviewers, they can't talk about anything on their resume because it's been AI generated. So I think the biggest challenge, especially with, you have a lot of people out here who are capitalizing off of cybersecurity in terms of training, in terms of quote unquote helping people, but they're monetizing off of people and they're giving them false hopes and dreams, and they're building resumes that aren't real. But they're not the ones that have to go and sit in these interviews and talk about what's on their resume. We have somebody that said the problem is without the keywords, people have no chance of being seen. So now we're talking going back into that gap, right? How do you fix all these things that are going on if you have a system that's only checking for specific things and it's, leaving certain people out?
I think that's really what's going on with the saturation too. So Awais was talking about the different certifications that are required. And a lot of colleges like WGU, for instance, they are embedding certifications in with their programs. So certification is great on paper, because before AI and before this was common, it kind of showed that you had some type of training that was third-party validated. It wasn't just you saying, hey, I can do this. I've got to CCNA, I can program a Cisco switch. It actually, Cisco validated you and said, yes, they took a test and they were able to do this to this level. Same thing with college. That's what college would show, is that you could do something over a certain amount of time. So there's a pretty good chance that you would be able to come in to work and do something similar. With everybody doing that, especially with cert boot camps now, where you just, in the military, we called it choke and puke. You basically study and cram all the material, and then you take your test, and then you're good. You can forget everything that you did. We're seeing that over and over and over again, where people are getting these certifications, but they can't speak to the material. So with the ATS, with the keywords, with the certifications, how does somebody stand out as opposed to somebody without certifications, college, and the keywords? How, as a hiring manager, should I be able to pick out a candidate that doesn't have those versus somebody that does?
So then what's the answer to that? Because I think that lends itself into this whole conversation, is we've created this environment where these are the requirements and the expectations. But now when you get that and it comes across your desk and it comes across, hiring managers, now you're in a situation where everybody's trying to quote unquote beat the system, but now you don't have candidates that can actually do the job. So how do you
what I look for personally is experience. Certs in college are kind of off the table when I'm originally trying to find a candidate. They add to, once I find a few reputable candidates, they add to that evaluation. But I'm looking for really experience. So bullet points, what they did, where they worked. And then from there, I typically call and try to validate that experience. Did this person work for your company? Did they do this role? And I try to get as much information. Sometimes hiring managers, they just give you yes and no. Yes, they worked here. Yes, they were a good candidate, and they get off the phone with you. Others, especially if they were listed as like a reference, that sometimes they'll go out and tell you everything that they did. And sometimes it's even better than what the candidate listed on their resume. In addition to that, them having the certs, that gives me a little bit of a safety net, especially with my senior leadership. If something goes wrong, I can say, hey, look, they should, if they shut down the, I think I gave an example in our original post of somebody that they scanned the network and AWS saw it as a threat and they shut down the network for a business. It costs a lot of money. If they do something like that, it's going to be on them, but it's also on me as a hiring manager because I hired them in. So if they've got some type of certification behind them, I can lean on that and defend myself. I can say, hey, they were credentialed. They should have known better. They were given access to the policies. We onboarded them. But it just gives me extra layers of protection versus people without certifications. But experience is, I think, where everything's at. It's just trying to validate that experience and get people to speak to it.
Can I ask something? Yeah. So, Jeremy, you just mentioned about the experience, like entry-level position, a candidate like me who has been recently graduated from a university and he has a certification, but he does not have any real-time experience in the cybersecurity or networks. So, what's your recommendation on that? And if everyone has been looking for the experience, and where can we like candidates like me who do not have any experience, what can we do? How can we land into the job, or how can we have some opportunity like foot in the door?
So there's a couple different routes, and Matt, feel free to jump in if you've got some input as well. But what I tell a lot of the people I mentor, and I mentor a lot of veterans that are transitioning from military service where they did technical roles, but it might not convert one for one into civilian roles. I try to get them into IT if that's what they're passionate about. But getting that initial IT experience it's a great baseline. And the reason that I say that, it's not the only pipeline in, but whenever I give advice, especially for career progression, I think about being as broad as possible, because if I'm ever in a position where I have to take a step back from my position, if I can't land laterally or above to a higher level position, I don't want to go all the way back to help desk. I hope that never happens to me. So if I've got a broad amount of experience, I'm experienced in networking, I'm experienced in system administration, I'm experienced in a lot of different applications and risk management. So trying to get that initial IT experience across systems administration, across DevOps, across network engineering, that gives you a really good baseline. And what I like about that on a resume when I'm hiring somebody is if they've got some system admin experience and some network admin, especially firewall experience, that's a perfect jump over to cybersecurity because they understand the firewall at an operational level, not just on a textbook, but they understand how a business functions, what kind of rules, because when you get into textbook things, it doesn't always work and convert over into the real world. So you have to have gaps or you have to have exceptions to things. So I like to see experience in that. And then being able to move from systems administration, for instance, into a cybersecurity analyst role is pretty easy because you understand the logs, you understand how the systems function and how they need to function to be profit driving in a business. And then you can set recommendations or rules as needed.
So on this particular point, I would like to mention that I have been applying on these bunch of roles that you just mentioned, like IT help desk, network engineer, desktop engineer. Like most of the people, like the professionals, they have been suggesting candidates like me who are looking for the entry level. So professionals are also suggesting same kind of advice. But the thing is, when I try to apply on these jobs as well, on these roles, so they are also looking for the experience, like 1 or 2 years of experience. Now, the basic question is, where can we figure out that experience when no one is ready to give us any chance, when the industry has not been considering us as an entry level role. They are looking for a bunch of tools that we should know. They are looking for a bunch of technologies we should know, like the cloud technologies, AWS, Azure, and then the Google ones. But how can we figure out, how can we have some foot in the door? when everything is just like it looks like they have closed the door from inside and they are not willing to let us in. So what should we do?
So, and that's what I think makes cybersecurity really difficult. And it's been the same since 2006 when I got into the industry. Trying to just break into IT is a challenge. And cybersecurity, a lot of companies see that as a higher level, a specialization of IT. So getting your foot into the door, a lot of people say, go help desk. And that works for some people. Some people, they get trapped in it. And some people, they can't even get help desk jobs. What I've seen work for a lot of the people that I've mentored is I tell them while they're applying for positions to try to find very small businesses, nonprofit organizations, or churches in their community, and just do freelance work. They don't even have to pay you, but if you're building that kind of resume up and you're getting those bullet points, it can help. And at the same time, hopefully you're trying to apply to jobs laterally, and then you're also, if you've got the funding for it, trying to get certifications or something to stand out. I don't typically recommend people go to college right away. With the military, it's a little bit different because they have their GI Bill to lean on. But just trying to get, and there's free certifications out there as well. I think ISC Squared has certified in cybersecurity, the CC Cert. I think Fortinet does a lot of free certifications for their firewall. So just getting little things like that, just to try to get your foot in the door. And that's the goal, is getting the initial IT position and holding that for a couple years really increases your odds of being able to get into cybersecurity.
I want to give Matt a chance to chime in on this as well.
Sure. So I really agree a lot with what you're saying. I think that you're spot on. And Awais, I'm sorry that you're going through this many problems. I mean, it's disheartening, and I can only imagine what you're dealing with. But it is one of those things that's very tough. And I've hired people out of the military. I've hired people that are level 1 that are straight out of college. But if I step back for a minute and look at what's going on, Jeremy needs those top level people. He doesn't have time to go mentoring those people and bring them in, because I brought in level 1 people who've never been in organizations before, and they've had a college degree and it's their first time in cyber, and they've eaten it up. They've done a fantastic job. But yeah, you don't necessarily want to start them out running, doing things, but you need to put them in a sandbox. You don't just give them access to AWS. I've seen the same thing you're talking about, Jeremy, of, shutting down the whole system. It's problematic. And I do think that a lot of what Jeremy's suggesting too is really good, because you find a small company, you get to play with everything. I mean, there's always trade-offs when you're looking at stuff. Sometimes those big companies are going to bring you in. So I would say, look at the big companies and look at the small companies, and at least they've got a pipeline of being able to train you and get you going in the right direction. It's a matter of doing it. It is very tough, because everybody needs to have, because companies are designed to be, hey, you need to maximize profit, maximize this. And because CISOs are so squeezed, that whole mentorship and coaching, which should be part of every single job. I know that's one of the discussions, Tonia, what you wanted to get into is, what's the responsibility that organizations have? Now, I think organizations should have some responsibility to get the next generation going and making them happy in the role that they're in. I think that makes the whole world a better place. But most companies are running off of profit, and you've got to go get things done. And you're stuck in a situation that's, hey, I need top-notch people. I cannot wait to go get somebody up from the ground floor if they don't have any basic experience. For me, I also think that, understanding the network is very important. So I like CCNA, even including like if you're going for a Windows job, because you're going to understand what that network is. You understand what subnetting is, or VLAN ACLs, and all of those sorts of things. But the more experience you get, the better. But even if you're working at a small company, you do get to play around with a lot of different tools, and you get a lot under your belt. Whereas you work at a large company, usually it's like, okay, I've got this sub function of what's going on, including people who do like some large companies. I've even worked at Verizon. You'd find people who would just do racking and stacking, and that's it. They don't actually play with any of the equipment. They will plug in the cables and map things over, and that's it. Other than the racking and stacking. So you have to take a look at what's right for you. And I know right now it's getting any job that you can, because I imagine things are getting pretty tight for you. But that's what I would do, is try to focus on that, try to get that CCNA as well. But that other work, bring it out in your resume as much as possible. Because if I saw you had all that experience and I needed somebody with your skill set, I would consider hiring you. It's just the reality, and companies are not always in a good situation in order to do that. It's just an ugly reality that we have to deal with.
And I also want to bring up, I think a lot of people when they get into cybersecurity, especially like Awais, who are finishing their degrees and they're trying to figure out. I think one of the biggest challenges with people entering the field is they don't have a roadmap. They don't know what they want to do. So they figure I can do everything. But cybersecurity, and I said this on my post, it is like the ocean. You're expecting to cast a net and grab something, but it's just nothingness out there. If you have no clue what your interests are, what lane you want to be in, and then that determines, well, what certification should I get? Because you don't want to waste time and money on certifications you're never going to use. But you're following this blueprint that you've been given and told, go get all these certs, then you'll be able to get a job. That's not the truth. You got to have some type of roadmap on, do you want to go GRC? Do you want to go cyber analyst? What lane do you want to go in? And then allow those skills to start building as you determine what your lane is. And I think that's why mentorship is so important, because a lot of people are getting into this field without any type of conversations. They're listening to whomever online, or they're have this mindset that I'm going to get into cybersecurity and make all this money without having any type of plan. And so when you sit down and talk to someone who's gone through what you're trying to go through, or can help guide you, give you that roadmap, and be realistic. Because I think the biggest thing is a lot of people are being sold puppy dogs and rainbows, and they're not being told the truth. And they're not given the hardcore reality that this is going to be tough and it's not going to be easy. You're not going to get it overnight. But what do you have to do to get it? And as a mentor, I'm going to not necessarily guarantee you a job, but prepare you so that you can put yourself in a position to make yourself valuable.
I think finding a mentor, if I was sitting in the position of being a student or trying to get into the industry, finding somebody that's in it and doing it is really important as well, because I've met a lot of people that have gotten into cybersecurity and they've ended up being kind of pushed into like a GRC role, because all they were just looking for whatever cybersecurity job they could land. And they just absolutely hate GRC. Or incident response. The number of people that I've hired under incident response, that it looks great because you're responding to hackers, you're dealing with all this Hollywood stuff, but the pressure of it is real. I've been physically assaulted by board members before, because they're really worried about the company going down. It's kind of their reputation on the line. They're going to lose a very high-paying, high-level six-figure job. So I've had people grab my shoulders, I've had them shake me, and I've had people underneath me that's come in and done these roles, and they've been screamed at and they quit the same day. And that's, like, for a company, that's one of the worst things that could happen, is having somebody that they hired in to do incident response walk out of the door.
Wow. So I want to get to a couple questions, and then we're getting close to time, and I have a question I want to ask each one of you. But first, I'm going to get to a couple of questions in the comments. Someone said, there are many skilled professionals looking. When will they get a chance? And I think some of that was answered, but I'll give you guys an opportunity if you want to expand on that.
I would just go back and say the saturation that we kind of talked about. There's a lot of skilled professionals. There's a lot of layoffs happening. A lot of people that were laid off back in 2025, they're still collecting severance. So their severance that they pre-negotiated haven't even run out yet. So we're seeing kind of a rubber band effect of 2025 layoffs. Plus now we're projected to have over 350,000 2026 layoffs. So there's just a lot of people applying to these roles right now.
Another question, and I think I can kind of chime in on this. As a career changer and currently an IT auditor, how do you get companies and enterprises to understand the significance of PKI so those gaps become less? And is there anything that auditing can look at with this? So I will tell you that PKI is like the redheaded stepchild. A lot of times, I think people just want their certificates and they want it to work. They don't understand the nuances of that infrastructure, that it's not just certificates. It's so many other layers to PKI. And I'm sure it's not just PKI. I'm sure there's other lanes in cybersecurity that have the same issue. But I do believe that there's some companies, especially smaller companies, that don't do annual auditing. They don't do the compliance checks that they have to do. So then you run into, they don't know that they need these things, or that they have these security gaps until it's too late. So it's about changing the security posture and the security mindset of organizations, as opposed to broadcasting, hey, you need PKI, but why? So that's a mindset. Yes.
From my perspective, this goes back to, how do you communicate? And to me, this is something you want to get your, IT steering committee, you want your security steering committee, risk steering committee in a perfect world. I know most companies don't go this far, but also bringing in the business. And I know for a lot of people, they're terrified of that. I have met quite a few, but I've also met a lot of people like, no, I brought in business and it's changed everything. It's been wonderful. But there still is a lot of fear. And I've met a lot of people who have a lot of fear of dealing with the business. I'm of the ilk that they need to learn a little bit about the other worlds as well. We need to be better communicators, but they need to be able to listen to us. Sometimes we're going to slip a little bit, but when you take a look at the NACD, for example, they talk about the companies that are doing best. And when I give speeches, I sometimes will ask certain questions that are leading from my perspective. I know the companies that are communicating, and I can say, yep, this company is communicating. They're communicating with the business, they're communicating with others, and they understand what all of this stuff actually means and why is it important. And when you're having good communication skills and you're focusing your time, again, a lot of CISOs don't have time for this. They're thrown into the fire, get this stuff done. Oh, if you don't, you're out of here type stuff. And there's a lot of damage that's going on from that standpoint. And there's a lot of CISOs that are leaving the industry altogether simply because of the situation that they're in. That's a whole nother category. But on the other hand, when you start to get these people communicating and you start to understand, and also, do you talk in trade-offs? How are you talking about risk? I know so many CISOs who walk in there and say, we've got $100 million risk. Buy me something. That is a terrible argument. No business leader is going to buy that. And it actually pains me with a lot of the risk solutions that are out there that give numbers like this. And that is not a good discussion point. And a lot of people are using risk in the wrong way. And this is where you need to be a little bit tighter in the discussion. What's the impact? Why are we doing it? Like somebody was bringing up 47 days, changing the PKI. I've never seen the certificates being changed every 47 days, but I have seen 1 year. And this is why you need to change it.
It's not there yet, but the industry is changing.
Yeah.
By 2029, all third-party certs will be on a 47-day life cycle. So right now, companies like DigiCert, Let's Encrypt, they're starting to shorten their lifespan to 6 months from a year.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? Automation.
It's the only way to do it.
That's the only way to do it. But if your company doesn't even have a good security posture with certificate management, you are in trouble.
Yeah, totally. But it's about explaining the details behind that in a way that's going to resonate from a business standpoint.
Absolutely.
Most people don't take the time to understand where the business is coming from. Ergo, they have trouble communicating back to the business. And that is a whole different set of communication skills that I have found a lot of CISOs don't know how to have. And those skills are incredibly important. And a lot of that boils down to, how do you think about risk? How do you think about the business? How are you thinking about alignment? And what approach are you taking? And if you do that, that's where you can start to make the changes. This is where you can get into those PKI discussions. This is where you get into those AI risk discussions. And you're getting the legal team, you're getting the human resources team, you get others. That's where the real power comes from. But only if the company and the senior leaders are willing to sit down and communicate.
And leadership in a company is really important too, because I've worked for several companies, especially as a consultant, where security is just not on their mind at all. They don't care. They want to run fast, they want to run lean, and they want the program to be able to take advantage of all the technologies that are out there, whether it be AI is a big one right now. That's why I like to stay in kind of the regulated environments, just because there's an extra penalty there versus non-regulated. I tend to find a lot of businesses that are not regulated, that their leadership is kind of anti-security in a lot of ways. And then I see also kind of to Matt's point, CISOs don't always understand risk themselves. I was actually a keynote speaker here recently, and I was speaking right before the presentation. I was speaking to another CISO that got up and was talking about risk. And he was talking about how he transferred all this risk. And that's kind of their policy, is just transfer everything. And risk transference is not, it's not standalone. Like, there's still risk when you transfer the risk. It's not a catch-all. So the way that I always think of it is risk management goes down in a cycle. So you've got risk avoidance, you just don't do it. You've got risk mitigation, so you do it and you try to control it a little bit. And then you've got risk transference, where you try to transfer it to somebody else's and get them to co-own the problem. And then risk acceptance, which is obviously the most risky. With transference, that's third down on the list. So it's more risky in my mind than mitigation, and it's more risky than risk avoidance. And for him, it was kind of a light bulb aha moment of, I've never thought about it linear like that. I've just thought transfer the risk and get it out of my hands.
Yeah. I'm going to move on to one more question from the comments that I think Awais might be able to chime in on. This is a couple people asked, as a career changer, and these are several same comments from questions. How can I apply my various previous work experience and prior career to the jobs, as well as would projects, volunteering, or anything help with experience, hands-on experience? So I want to ask Awais, do you have projects that you've been adding to your resume or anything like that?
About the projects, I did some capstone projects, especially one in my university and one was from my boot camp. And recently I've been working on Tri-Hack Me. So I've been working on those projects as well. So on part of that, you can show, like, especially I think that the networks is the most important stuff to understand before diving into cybersecurity. And because once you have a complete understanding or a well understanding of networks, it can really help you to understand the rest of the system.
Cool. And I think, like, one of the things that I'm doing with the training program that I have is a GitHub repo, which I think is extremely important when you're going through training programs, is to show the work that you're doing, because that is your portfolio resume that says, hey, I actually have done this work, not just read some books and took an exam. I actually did hands-on experience. And when we talk about non-traditional roles, people that don't have the ability to maybe afford a degree program or take certifications, go out and get a GitHub, open up a GitHub repo, do a hands-on lab at home, but show your work, because you can't just say, oh, I have a hands-on lab at home. Anybody can say that, but show that you're actually completing the work and your experience and how you're building that out. I think that would be helpful. So I'm going to get to the last question, because we are down to the wire here. And this is for everybody on the panel. What is one change you would implement starting tomorrow to help reduce the talent gap? And I'm going to start with Awais.
So I think that everyone deserves a chance, at least one chance. So afterwards, if he should given some grace period, at least some volunteership along with mentorship, like 6 months to 1 year at least. And afterwards, if that guy he's able to perform in the industry, so he will continue. Otherwise, I think he will by himself leave the industry, and he might switch, and he will understand that the industry is not his piece of cake. So for me, if I'm at some position, so for sure, at least I will give someone a chance at the level of, if I'm not able to pay him, I will offer him some volunteership. So if you are ready, okay, I can help you as a volunteer. You can come to me, join me, and sit there, try to understand. And if I feel comfortable, like one month or 2 months, when I feel comfortable, I would offer him at least the minimum payment that he should receive. Afterwards, if he has been performing well, so I think he needs to get some high pay. So that's from my side.
You're on mute.
Yes, I was. I was saying I really like that, Awais. I like the perspective that you're bringing, especially for someone who's trying to break into the industry. Jeremy, I'm going to give you the chance to answer that question.
Yeah, so jumping on to what we said, I would absolutely love to be able to take on volunteers. I've been working on kind of a volunteer program for about 3 years, trying to get it set up with the hospital. But because we're a regulated industry and there's a lot of liability there, there's a lot of hoops for me to jump through, and I have to be completely sure that I'm not breaching HIPAA or breaking any rules there. I would say from what I would change in the industry if I could. One of the things that I've seen is a shift with like WGU and other colleges offering certifications as part of their program, which I like. That's a great model to have because it gives students the ability to get the certifications while getting their college degree, which is kind of a double positive for them. But I would take it a step further and say that internships should be a part of college as well. If they could do that, that would be amazing. And there's a lot of companies doing great things with volunteers and internships. CrowdStrike, I know Cisco, when I was coming into the industry, they were doing a lot of internships back then. But if colleges had that capability to be able to offer real world experience as part of their degree path, I think that would help out a lot.
I like that. Matt, you want to answer that question?
Sure. I mean, I kind of feel like in a certain sense, it's one of the things, it's one of my many core missions that I'm doing is part of Cyvergence. Part of what I'm doing is educating others. I mean, I've got a lot of posts and a lot of things that are out there. I've got a lot of people that are following and reading a lot of stuff that I'm doing, but also I'm big on leadership at all levels. You've got to make sure that you've got some sort of leadership. It's something that's missed. Most people don't have either management or leadership training within organizations. We have got a leadership crisis in America, which is being amplified by corporations. We aren't teaching basic leadership skills. We don't know what works and what doesn't from a leadership perspective. I've got the course for CISOs, which I have some non-CISOs as well that do take that course, but I'm teaching a lot of leadership skills, and communication is one of those leadership skills. There's a lot that goes into it, understanding the different personalities and how they relate and how they work with things and how you need to adapt. You can't just use a one size fits all from a leadership perspective. You will fail as a leader. I've had my bumps and bruises over the years, but I've learned kind of at the school of hard knocks, and I've said enough. I'm going to start, going through other approaches. And I also have a leadership exchange that I do for senior leaders where I'm giving them an education, getting them understanding the psychology and understanding how things like power begin to affect you as a leader, because it completely changes the whole ball game for where you're at. So, I mean, those are just a few things that I'm doing right now to try to change that game, because I think you get good leadership, it starts to change everything else around you.
I love the perspective from the leadership side, because a lot of times we look at it from mentoring, from communication skills from the bottom up, but we don't talk about from the top down. So that's a very important perspective. And I want to say on my end, I feel like what I'm doing right now with CyberVisionaries is creating a what I call a career aligned pathway. I talked about this earlier. It's not just about, hey, take this program and get a certification. If I could change anything in the industry, is not necessarily get rid of certifications, but how we measure qualified people against certifications, and not use that as a core baseline, and actually allowing people to have career aligned focus when they are taking these certification programs, not just giving them a bunch of information and saying go take an exam and then expecting them to get a job afterwards. The key thing with any program that I develop within CyberVisionaries is about how does this directly align with what you want to do, and what is your role, what is your goal, what are you actually interested in, and how can we help you get there, and then road mapping that out for people so that they have a realistic mindset of this is what my path is going to look like, and the skills that I already have, how does that transfer into the things that I'm learning? Because you do have transferable skills. You just have to figure out how to use that, and how to add that to what you're already doing. So I think this industry, we kind of, it's kind of like the wild, wild west right now. You know, it's open the floodgates and let them go. And, you know, the weak get eaten, you know, and that's where we kind of are right now. So, Awais, you wanted to say something because you were coming off mute. So I wanted to give you a chance to.
Yeah, as a aspirant, I was just going to ask if there is some opportunity, Jerry, on your end, and Matthew, if there is some opportunity for me, please let me know. It will be a great favor for me. Even as a volunteer, I'm open to serve. So I need something to put in the door. Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. I think we're connected on LinkedIn, so.
Yeah, make sure you connect with all of us on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I sent the I sent the invitation to both of you, so if you guys can see, thank you.
And anybody that's on the call that's a recruiter, Awais, say your last name for me.
It's Awais Haider.
Okay, look out for him. He's you know, and I know everyone is struggling right now, and it's a difficult industry right now. And I think you know, being in rooms with people to have conversations like this is so important, to see where people are. And I think as industry leaders, we need to start meeting people where they are, because not everybody is in the same place. So I'm going to end this. We're gonna get to the end. I want to say, does anybody have any last parting words or any statements that they want to make? No. So first of all, I want to say thank you so much, gentlemen, all three of you, for joining the panel. This has been an amazing conversation. I've learned things. I'm pretty sure people that are in the comments have learned things and gotten a different perspective. Someone said this panel has great perspectives on this topic. And that is so true, because we all bring something different to the table. And I think, you know, more conversations like this need to happen, especially like when we talk about CISOs and we talk about being in the room with leadership. These are the conversations that they need to hear. So once again, I want to thank you so much for joining. Awais, I'm going to be hoping the best for you, and that you definitely find something. Please stay connected with all three of us, and you know, wherever I see opportunities, I will shoot them your way. So with that being said, thank you all so much for joining, and have a great night.
You too.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a great night.
You
Thank
too.
you. Bye-bye.